Was the moon landing mankind's giant leap? Or was it Hollywood's greatest special effect? Was the global vaccine rollout just an elaborate scheme by Bill Gates to implant microchips in all of us? And do the condensation trails you see behind aeroplanes in the sky contain chemicals to keep the population docile? Let's be honest, a small part of us loves a good conspiracy theory. They're exciting. They make the world seem a little less random. But why are these ideas so sticky? What makes us want to believe the unbelievable? And is there a fine line between enjoying a wild theory and falling down a rabbit hole of misinformation? With me to discuss the psychology of conspiracy theories is Professor Jan-Willem van Prooijen, who is Head of Social Psychology at the Free University Amsterdam. The second edition of his book, The Psychology of Conspiracy Theories, is out in December, published by Routledge, and it's the perfect Christmas gift for that one uncle who's convinced lizard people run the government. Hello, Jan-Willem.
Hello, hello.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
It's a really interesting topic, and I've just had a little bit of fun in the introduction there by citing some of the more out there theories, I suppose. But these ideas have a very powerful grip on the human imagination. So can we start right at the beginning of what makes a conspiracy theory as opposed to just a normal theory?
Right. Well, a conspiracy theory is a specific form of theory. It's a theory assuming that there's a group of people who are colluding in secret to pursue actions that most people would consider immoral, malevolent, criminal. It's an unproven suspicion of a conspiracy. And these theories can get sometimes really elaborate. You saw that in various settings. Think of the lab leak theory a couple of years ago. Also think further back in time with the 9/11 terrorist strikes. Some of these theories were very elaborate, but that the essence is it's a theory that a conspiracy exists to harm us all. That's the essence.
So are they always negative? It's always got to do with harm?
Yeah, at least how we conceive of it in scientific research. That's how we investigate and operationalize it in real life, in everyday life. There can also be positive conspiracy theories. An example that I like to give is, we always conspire towards our children in December to persuade them that Santa Claus exists, right? So that's...
What are you saying, Jan-Willem? This is news to me. Hang on a second. This is a conspiracy theory.
Oh, sorry.
Spoil it. Yeah, spoiler alert.
Spoil the mystery for you, Paul. But
yes, you're right, aren't you? I say that we conspire together as a group of adults to give a positive experience to the children.
Exactly, yeah. So, but I also think, that those conspiracy theories, are a little different. That's at least not how we investigate it. At the same time, we have some data actually suggesting that also the more evil conspiracy theories also often have a positive element in it. It's often not only an evil conspiracy, but usually a struggle between good and evil. That's what the data seem to suggest. So, an example would be the QAnon conspiracy theory, or the QAnon is.
Could you explain that? Because I'm not sure what that one is.
Yeah, it's a conspiratorial movement that started in 2017 in the United States during the first Trump presidency. It's a far-right, pro-Trump conspiratorial movement, assuming that there's a secret war going on where Donald Trump tries to dismantle a deep state of left-wing political elites who control society, and that assumes not only a negative conspiracy, these hostile politicians, this deep state, but also a positive force, a resistance force. In this case, in this conspiracy theory led by Donald Trump. So it's always, not only an evil group, but also a brave group of conspiracy adherents that fights it.
Yes, okay. That's new to me, but I guess I'm in England, so I may not hear of that quite so much. You said there you study these theories.
Yeah.
How do you study them?
So I look mostly at the psychology of conspiracy theories. So the essence of that is the question, well, what determines whether or not people believe in certain conspiracy theories? Is that rooted in people's personality? Is it rooted in situational circumstances? So what's driving it? That's what needs does it fulfill? Also, I'm looking at the question, what are the possible consequences of believing in conspiracy theories? So these are all elements of the psychology of conspiracy theories. And yeah, how do I study that? Via a broad variety of research methods. So sometimes I do experiments. So I can, for instance, see if, if people in more frightening situations are more likely to believe conspiracy theories than in less frightening situations. That could be an example of a study that I could conduct. Also, I do sometimes broader survey studies among the general population to see to what extent certain beliefs, how widespread certain beliefs are, and also what determines belief in that. But also sometimes I use different research methods. Sometimes, for instance, also analyses of social media posts, where which has the benefits, of course, that you can look at people's spontaneous behavior. Because no one, when you do a questionnaire, you're asking them questions and invite them to think about certain things. But what people post online on their social media account, that's all spontaneous, right? So that also can give a lot of useful information. So I'm not necessarily attached or tied to one research method. I do a lot of different things to get more insight in this psychology of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, okay. And obviously you're very careful at using the word the psychology of conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Am I right in saying you don't study whether conspiracy theories are right or not? It is the psychology behind them. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's a fair point to say. Of course, I am interested in some of the bigger conspiracy theories, whether or not they are right and wrong, of course, but it's not a topic of the research. So in principle, a conspiracy theory doesn't assume that a conspiracy theory necessarily is always wrong. It assumes the theory to be unproven. So the moment a conspiracy theory turns out true, it's not a theory anymore, right? So an example of that would be Watergate. That's not a theory. We know it happened. We know Nixon, benefited personally from information that was obtained illegally with the Watergate burglary. So yeah,
was the Watergate affair considered a conspiracy theory at the time, though, before the evidence came out?
Yes. So in 1972, the break-in occurred, and in 1974, Nixon stepped down. But in 1973, there were already rumors circulating, particularly among Democrats, of course, because Nixon was a Republican. We always form conspiracy theories about our political opponents. So these beliefs were particularly prominent among Democrats at the time. And yeah, at that time, according to the scientific definition, that would have been, a perfect example of a conspiracy theory. But that was one that turned out true eventually. So they can sometimes turn true.
Have you found that people who believe in conspiracy theories today, contemporary theories, use things like that as evidence to say, well, look, that was a conspiracy theory, and then it was proven to be true?
Yeah, I think that's a very common way that conspiracy theorists use to, make their ideas more plausible. They can point at actual instances of corruption that no one disputes, and there's plenty of it, like the Volkswagen diesel scandal, the Viva corruption scandal, just to name a few. They can seize on that and say, you see how corrupt all these people are, and that's there's two sides of that. On the one hand, it's true that these incidents happened. At the same time, they don't prove other conspiracy theories being true. It only proves that some elites are also human beings, and that dishonesty occurs at all levels of society, but it doesn't prove that all political or societal elites are dishonest, or that all conspiracy theories are true. So, but yeah, of course, and there's actually also research showing that, and that makes a lot of sense to me, I must say, that international research, that in countries where there are higher levels of actual corruption, so more actual conspiracies, you could say. People are also more likely to believe in conspiracy theories, including the less realistic ones. So yeah, if I can, maybe a bit of a blunt way to say it is the more you
Yeah.
actually get screwed by the government, the more likely you are also to believe in a lot of conspiracy theories about it, including ones that may actually be a little far-fetched.
Of course, it's reinforcement at the end of the
Yeah,
day, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
In the introduction, I mentioned a few, I guess, more of the outlandish conspiracy theories. What are some of the more outlandish ones that you've come across?
Well, there's a lot of truly outlandish ones. I think the ones that I think are pretty outlandish and also really well known, nevertheless, are there's two that come to mind. First of all, the one that the Earth is flat. This is a growing movement, which is really surprising in light of all the evidence that the Earth is actually a globe. The belief that the Earth is flat in itself doesn't have to be a conspiracy theory, but because it's just an anti-scientific belief, but it almost
Yes.
always goes along with accusations and beliefs that there's a conspiracy to hide the truth from the public for reasons that have always remained a bit of a mystery to me, actually. Well, because why would you lie about the shape of the planet Earth? But okay,
Yeah, who
so that's
benefits
one.
from that?
Yeah, that's one. Another one that also really stuck with me is one that was promoted by a British conspiracy theorist, David Icke. That's the one that politicians actually are a breed of alien lizards that came to Earth to oppress and exploit humanity. And that's also an interesting one, particularly as it is very obvious where that conspiracy theory came from. It came from a fiction series from the 1980s called V. There was a remake about 10 years later, actually.
I've seen that, yeah.
Which is exactly this theme. I think in the series, I'm not sure if it's necessarily elites. It's been years since I last seen it, but
The thing I remember, I was quite young, but I remember the way that they were found out. Somebody spotted one of them eating a rat,
yes,
and then it
yes.
sort of gave the whole business away that they weren't
The
particularly
whole
human. Yeah.
idea behind it is still lizards from outer space dressed up as humans with nefarious intentions. So yeah, it's
Okay.
pretty obvious where that conspiracy theory came from. But yet, it's also a belief that some people have, and
Yeah.
and that's amazing.
And one of the ones you write about in the book is the chemtrail conspiracy
Yeah,
theory. And I found that interesting because, one, I
yeah,
hadn't heard it before. And we've all
right.
seen aeroplanes in the sky with the
Yeah,
chemical condensation trails behind them.
yeah,
And maybe people don't know the science behind why they do, but I think most people assume that it is just the fumes coming out at the other end. But the survey of US citizens found that when they were asked if actually what this is chemicals placed into the atmosphere by nefarious governments or what have you to keep the population docile, 10% said that is definitely true, and
yeah,
29% said it's somewhat true. So
yeah,
that's 39% of US citizens who were surveyed
yeah,
felt that that was somewhat true or more. That's
yeah.
strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. I must say, yeah, I can imagine these figures to fluctuate a little bit over surveys if you do it multiple times, but then still, these are amazing numbers. I must say the main conspiracy theory about so what you're saying, so to keep the population meek and docile, that's one example of a chemtrail conspiracy theory. A little bit more popular, actually, is the conspiracy theory that these chemtrails are used as geoengineering. So as a means of governments to control the weather. And this is actually a pretty popular idea among people that the government secretly tries to control the weather. And chemtrails are connected also to that theory. But still, it's amazing. Because
Those people obviously haven't been to England because it's raining here most of the time. And if we're going to make the weather anything, surely
so
we
there
wouldn't
should be
make it
more
rain all the
airplanes
time.
above British
In Florida, maybe. Yeah,
yeah.
I'd believe it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that interests me as well because going through the book, I circled every time when it was referenced a survey of US citizens or a
Yeah.
survey of US respondents.
Yeah.
Is surveying US people really representative of the nation as a whole when it comes to belief in conspiracy theories?
Yeah, that's a good and fair question. Yeah, there's definitely cultural differences in conspiracy theories. The truth of the matter is the most research happens among U.S. citizens for a couple of reasons. Because there's a lot of American researchers, and also because that's a research population also within Europe that we have relatively easy access to. So it's also a bit of a sample of convenience, you could say. It's not representative, of course, for the entire population, but fortunately there have also been cross-cultural studies. I have a couple of Chinese PhD students who also, for instance, collect data from China. And yes, you see a lot of similarities, but also some differences between the countries. Also, there's been a research on cross-cultural research looking at many more nations. And there are some cultural factors that do influence it. At the same time, there are also a lot of similarities. I think everywhere conspiracy theories are rooted in negative emotions, negative expectations. I think that's pretty universal. But how they materialize, the kind of conspiracy theories that people believe in, some of the consequences of that can definitely differ across culture, and susceptibility to certain conspiracy theories can definitely differ between cultures.
Yeah, that does make sense. And another study I looked at by Hamilton in 2022 suggested that people who support Donald Trump are more likely to agree with conspiracy claims that vaccinations implant tracking microchips, the Earth is flat, and that NASA astronauts did not land on the moon. What do you think of that correlation?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, particularly in the United States, because in the United States, these anti-vaccine conspiracy theories were heavily politicized, and they were a lot bigger among Republicans. Also, we know from research in the United States that Republicans generally tend to be more susceptible to these conspiracy theories overall and than Democrats. Doesn't mean they don't occur among Democrats, and some conspiracy theories are actually a lot bigger among Democrats. Think of 9/11 for truth. Conspiracy theories, because there was a Republican in the White House when it happened. But overall, they're more common among Republicans. Also, Donald Trump actively propagated them. If you look at the United States, the official White House website, you'll find that the lab leak theory is now officially being stated as the cause of the pandemic on the White House website at the moment.
Okay, and the lab leak theory being that it was purposely made in a lab in China, is that right?
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's a bit of a milder variant. It doesn't clearly state where it was made on purpose. So there's various lab leak theories. One is the more extreme one, where it was deliberately made by humans and then deliberately released on the population. That's the more nefarious one. But there's also more milder variants where it was just a natural virus being investigated and then it leaked, and that was and that was then by the Chinese government swept under the carpet, so to speak.
Yeah. Let's go back to the psychology, because I'm interested obviously in that bit. And in your book, you argue that conspiracy theories are rooted in very recognizable, predictable psychological theories, and that one of those is the existential threat model of conspiracy theories. Could you describe what that is?
Yeah, so the existential threat model assumes that conspiracy theories emerge in response to feelings of existential threat. So existential threats can mean incidents or prolonged circumstances that are cause for distress and that people find threatening to their way of life, to their existence, to their well-being. These can be terrorist strikes or natural disasters or pandemic. It can also be more prolonged things like economic crisis, wars, climate change, poor life circumstances also. So a lot of these things can, qualify as or create feelings of existential threat, I would say. And the idea is that people, when people feel distressed, try to make sense of those negative circumstances. And that can potentially lead into conspiracy theories, provided that they have, there's a group sort of associated with that threat that they don't distrust. So there's a group to blame the threat on. That's the basic idea of the existential threat model. So yeah, it actually has two key elements. There need to be some distressing or stressing circumstance, which can take a lot of different shapes and forms,
Yeah.
and a group to blame for that. And that's the perfect recipe for conspiracy theories.
Okay. So in a conspiracy theory almost becomes, recognizing a pattern and having someone to blame and feeling that there's an explanation. And this is the
Yes.
explanation sometimes for, I guess, things which are random.
Yes.
So
Yes.
is it cathartic to believe in conspiracy theories? I mean, does
Yeah,
it help to reduce existential
right.
distress?
That's a common assumption that people have, and the interesting thing is, no, I don't think so. Actually, there's actually some research that suggesting that over time conspiracy theories only make people feel worse, and that also does make a lot of sense to me. At the end of the day, I don't think it's necessarily reassuring to believe there's a hostile group out there plotting to harm us all. That's actually, I mean, personally, I'd be terrified if I believed that. So yeah, I think it's a coping mechanism, but not necessarily a good coping mechanism if the goal is to feel good again. I think the motive is to achieve safety, but
Yeah.
we do so by assuming the worst and by trying to see, trying to understand what our enemies are up to and try to prepare for that. But that's, yeah, not as comforting as just believing that nothing is going on, so to speak.
Yes, yes. Yes, I see that. And again, it seems to come down to that intuitive nature of wanting to understand the world.
Yeah.
And when
yeah.
there's something that we don't understand, we want someone to blame for that thing as well. And we find patterns maybe where patterns don't exist.
Yes.
Now, in psychology, again, you have the illusionary pattern perception theory, apophenia. Can you explain how illusionary pattern perception fits in with conspiracy theories?
Yeah, so I think by definition, conspiracy theories connect events or and people and groups to one another that are not obvious to everyone. So it's all about seeing connections. That's pattern perception. Pattern perception is a very functional feature of the brain. We see cause and effect, and there is a lot of cause and effect in our real life. It's very functional for us to see that. But yeah, as you mentioned, there's also something that we call illusory pattern perception. And illusory pattern perception means that even when things are random, are truly coincidental, then still people see meaning and patterns in that. And we have data showing that the more likely people are to see patterns in what's actually random, the more likely they are to believe conspiracy theories. Now, we have investigated in a few ways. One was I did it with my British colleague Karen Douglas from the University of Kent. We an online randomizer for us threw a coin 100 times. So we got this coin flip outcomes, 100 throws. And then we showed the results to our participants, asking them, whether or not they saw something random there or a pattern. And the more likely they were to see patterns in that, the more likely they were to believe in a range of conspiracy theories, including the moon landing, 9/11, these things.
So just to be clear, the pattern of coin flips was random. You made sure it was definitely random, but they weren't told that. But if they said, oh no, hang on, I think I see a pattern here, then those people were more likely to believe in conspiracy theories as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Another study that we did was that's what you mentioned, apophenia. So that's when pattern perception is visual. Think of seeing a face in the clouds, for instance. We showed participants paintings by Jackson Pollock. Now, Jackson Pollock, these are these paintings. Some people just see paint splashed on canvas, and others see the most beautiful geometric shapes in there. And I'm not up here to judge anyone who sees one or the other. But what we do find empirically is that the more strongly people saw patterns in these abstract paintings, the more likely they were to also believe in conspiracy theories. So, and this tells us something, that the more likely the brain is to look for patterns, even when the stimuli that they're seeing or they're perceiving are actually random, then the more likely they are also to believe conspiracy theories.
How interesting, yeah. Does that also link to the Rorschach test then as well? Because you
I
show a
think so. Yeah,
random
the
ink
Rorschach
blot.
test. Yeah, I think the
Yeah,
Rorschach test is absolutely a form of apophenia. These are just, also random ink stains that anyone can interpret in whatever way they feel like.
yeah. And so if people who are more likely to believe in conspiracy theories have this increased chance of illusionary pattern perception, are they like Skinner's pigeons in the boxes? Are they the ones just reacting to something and saying and forming patterns when there are none, just like the pigeons?
Well, I think what the pigeon studies by Skinner shows is that this tendency towards pattern perception is really fundamental. It's really also other animal species have that, including pigeons. But for that, I need to repeat what I just said. It's very functional because there are a lot of patterns in our everyday life. So an example that I like to give is, going through work to traffic. If you go to work through traffic and you don't have the ability to see patterns, you're lost. You won't make it. You won't understand what a red traffic light is. You won't understand that that car that's coming your way is going to kill you if you are not careful. So it's very functional. The only problem with pattern perception is that we are sometimes mistaken, and we sometimes also see patterns when they're not there. So people are actually really good at seeing patterns, but we're really bad at seeing randomness.
Yes. It's like, I think pareidolia is one form of apophenia where we see
Right.
faces in the clouds or in burnt toast or in the front of a car. When the car has
Yeah.
two headlights and a grille, we think, oh, it's got a cute little face. But it's
Yeah.
a very good evolutionary strategy for us to be able to see not just faces, but the emotions connected to faces, isn't it? Because if we didn't know somebody was coming towards us with an angry emotion and they possibly were going to harm us, then we
Yeah.
wouldn't have lasted long enough to pass our
Yeah.
genes on to the next generation.
Yes, that's I think related, but also different from pattern perception. So that's what we call agency detection. So the ability to infer what other people are thinking, what other people are feeling, and what intentions they have towards you or towards others. And that's also very much related to conspiracy theories. Our recent research suggests that actually the link with agency detection might be a little stronger even than pattern perception, and that also makes sense to me. As conspiracy theories are all about intentions. Things didn't happen by accident. It was on purpose. So there was an intent behind it. There was a plan behind it. That's agency detection, and that's also, I think, a very important underlying cognitive mechanism to explain why people believe in conspiracy theories.
Yes, okay. Another one you mention in the book as well is proportionality bias. And that
Yeah.
seems to be a good cognitive quirk where we feel like big events must have big causes. Could you
Yes.
talk about that a little?
Yeah. So that's a heuristic that people often apply. So that's the idea that a big event must have had a big cause and a small event must have had a small cause. And that's not always the case. Sometimes here mistakes also can sometimes happen. Like when a president of the United States could theoretically die of a flu virus, right? So a very tiny, smallish flu virus can change the world, so to speak. But if that would happen, that would probably, I think many people would find it very suspicious because
Yeah.
intuitively that doesn't fit. Something as big as that can't possibly have been the work of a tiny virus. Think of the Kennedy assassination. One lunatic can't have possibly caused that with a rifle that he bought for $20
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
through the mail, and
And in this country, we had the death of Princess Diana as well, a huge event. And people cannot accept that it was just a random accident.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's that. I think that's an excellent example. There must be more to it. It can't possibly have been as simple as a tragic accident. Yeah.
One of the biggest, probably, proportionality bias is the very existence of humans and our intelligent humans. So is there a connection, do you think, in the psychological mechanisms behind conspiracy theories and religious beliefs?
That's an interesting question. So the link is strongest between non-institutionalized forms of belief. So think of paranormal belief, supernatural belief. So there you find a very clear link between conspiracy theories and belief with more institutionalized forms of religion like Christianity or then you can also find that link, but it's a lot weaker and it's more cultural dependent. So I have seen a study a while ago finding that the link between religiosity and conspiracy beliefs to some extent also depends on the extent to which religiosity is diagnostic for people's political preference. So think of, for instance, the United States. If you're born again Christian, then you're highly likely to be right of center and to vote Republican, right? But for instance, the Netherlands, if you're a Christian, that doesn't actually necessarily say much about your political preference. So in countries where religiosity is also very much diagnostic for your political preference, there you most clearly find that link, actually, but less so in countries where it's a little bit more flexible.
Yes, okay. And I suppose I was thinking, and I won't ask you to comment because you may not wish to, but the idea of when we talk about proportionality bias, agency bias, and even confirmation bias, which we haven't mentioned, but religion is that. It is almost that sense-making of the world. It is the idea, hang on a second, all of this cannot be random. You often hear people who are of a religious nature say, well, look around you, all of this cannot be random, so therefore there must be an explanation. And so they find one. And you could say, well, religion's the world's biggest conspiracy theory.
Well, that's a good question. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory because religion doesn't assume a conspiracy. But at
It
the
doesn't
same
have that
time,
villain, I suppose.
I do think it fulfills a couple of similar functions, like making sense of the world, trying to make the world more predictable. I also think religiosity actually is more capable than conspiracy theories to actually provide a source of comfort. Like I said, conspiracy theories are a response to distress, but tend to, if anything, make people only more distressed. Religiosity is different. So when people feel distressed and they start praying and trying to get close to God, that actually can be a big source of comfort to many people. So in that sense, I also think there's clear differences with conspiracy theories. But I agree, it has probably some similarities in the processes underlying it, pattern perception, agency detection, and in the general purpose of trying to make sense of the world. But I also think there's differences.
Yes, and you're right, that focus on a harmful, identifiable group or villain is not true in that religious sense. I am interested in that because when people cite conspiracy theories, often they use the word they. For example, they want to control us. They want you to think that. Do people who believe theories really understand who the they are to whom they're referring?
That's a really good question. I've always wondered that myself. Conspiracy theorists often talk about the elites, and I've always wondered who they are actually. Because
the secret cabals, the deep state people.
People in society that could arguably called elites, right? So they're politicians, scientists, judges, lawyers, you name it. People who serve in municipalities also are politicians. Are they also part of the elites? It can be thousands and thousands of people. How does that then work? Are they all one big conspiracy? So it's. I'm always a little curious who they are in the mind of some conspiracy theorists. I sort of sometimes have the idea that that's not even particularly clear to many conspiracy theorists themselves. There are some people in power out there. We don't know who they are, but they are trying to harm us, and they are powerful elites. It's like a mysterious enemy.
It is. I found just anecdotally that often people who suggest conspiracy theories to me are also the ones who say that people in government are idiots. They're stupid. They're headless chickens who don't know what they're doing. And those two things don't sit well with me because you think, well, how do you think that they're the secret cabal behind lots of conspiracy theories when actually you think they're not very good, clever people?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a very fair point. And there's lots of inconsistencies in these
Yeah.
belief systems, and this is potentially one of them. A lot of conspiracy theorists think the people in power are both immoral and stupid, but the conspiracy theories they believe in would require genius often to pull it off, right?
Yeah, Bond villains type style of genius. Yeah. Yeah. Are conspiracy theories a modern phenomenon?
Not necessarily. I think conspiracy theories have been with us already since ancient times. If you nowadays look at tribes in the Amazon or in Africa where people still live like in a relatively traditional way, I would say, these people also have conspiracy theories. They often take a bit of a different form. But then, for instance, think about an event where a tribe member dies under mysterious circumstances in a way they can't explain based on modern medicine. Then a common conspiracy theory that you then see emerging is he was killed by a conspiracy of sorcerers from an enemy village. And that can be a cause of a tribal warfare, actually.
Yeah, of course it could. But again, those underlying mechanisms are the same, even though the particular circumstances have changed.
Yeah, the cultural context and the situation is different, and so also the form and shape the conspiracy theory takes. But the essence is pretty similar, I think. It's always the negative circumstances that we have to cope with is their fault.
Yeah. What about the cultural context we find ourselves in with social media these days?
Yeah, yeah, that's. I think social media definitely has been a game changer. It's easier than ever before to spread conspiracy theories. Yeah, to a broad audience. When distressing events happen, when there's a fire, a flood, or a terrorist strikes, then within an hour, people at the other side of the world can read conspiracy theories about them on social media. That's, of course, a big difference. What I also think is maybe one of the biggest changes that social media have brought is that it's now very easy for people to find like-minded others, and that has the effect that people can very easily find validation for their beliefs. So in the 1970s, you would have believed that the Earth was flat, then you would have been the town's lunatic, right? That you wouldn't have really easily someone to talk to, or to most people would tell you, come on, dude. But now you just go online, you become a member of the Flat Earth Society.
You
There's
find your
hundreds
tribe, yeah.
that I completely agree with you, that discuss you, take you seriously, offer you slightly alternative perspectives, but all converging on the belief that the Earth is flat. This can completely change everything. You're not the one being crazy. All these people who still believe it's a globe are crazy. So it can make, therefore polarize people. It can make people more convicted of their own belief and therefore also more resistant to alternative beliefs.
And talk of modern cultural context, what role do movies and television play in the appeal of conspiracy theories?
That's a good question. It is something we need to investigate further, I think. But there's one key similarity between the two, which is we have found in our research that conspiracy theories are, to some extent, also entertaining to people. And the more entertaining people find them, the more likely is that they believe them. Now, there are various examples of movies that seemed to have sparked increased conspiracy theories, like when the movie JFK from Oliver Stone came out. You could see, there's been this agency that has been tracking conspiracy beliefs about the assassination of Kennedy throughout the years. And you could clearly, the years after that movie came out, you could really see a renewed spike in beliefs in that conspiracy theory among the US population. So, I do think there's a role of movies and in a sense, that's conspiracy theory does make society, make reality less boring, right? It's
and again, as a form of entertainment, it's wonderful,
life
isn't
becomes
it?
like it is in the movies. And in the movies, these conspiracies are, that's in portraying the existence of a conspiracy that the protagonist needs to fight against. That's a perfect recipe of a movie that's going to appeal to a broad audience. And
And one of the films you mentioned in the book, and it's a personal favourite of mine, is The Matrix.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and it's an example, obviously, of a fictional plot in there which suggests humans are living in a virtual reality illusion.
Yes,
Since
yes.
then, so that film came out in 1999. Since then, several very highly respected scientists, such as Nick Bostrom and even Professor Brian Cox, have suggested that the argument that we're living in a simulation is actually very hard to statistically deny.
Yeah.
So, does the simulation hypothesis fall into that category of a conspiracy theory? Because there would be someone running the hypothesis. There would be these beings, whether it's future humans, aliens, running us as a simulation. Does that make a conspiracy theory, or is that just a theory at the moment?
I think it is a conspiracy theory. In the definition of a conspiracy theory, it is never being said that the conspirators need to be human. So intelligent, sentient AI systems can also conspire against human beings. We actually are doing some research now on conspiracy theories about AI, and these matrix kind of conspiracy theories, is one type of fear that people have about, the fast developments in the area of AI. And about that point that you can't statistically disprove it, but I thought that was an interesting point for you to mention because that's also sort of inherent to conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories are often impossible to falsify. Even if you give evidence against the conspiracy theory, then the people fabricating that evidence are part of the conspiracy. You can always keep the conspiracy theory alive, and that's also the case for that one, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to move on to the people, really, who believe the theories rather than the theories themselves, just to sort of get into that a little bit. And we've talked about it a little bit already. But who believes in conspiracy theories? I suppose I'm getting into that. Are there certain personality factors that predict whether someone believes or disbelieves conspiracy theories?
Yeah, there's been some research on the basic personality traits, the big five, that has not really yielded much consistent results. There are a couple of other personality traits that do seem to predict conspiracy theories. So, for instance, narcissism. People who believe conspiracy theories tend to score higher on narcissism. Generally, the dark triad, so that's narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, seems to be associated with increased conspiracy beliefs. Also, some traits that predispose people to, for instance, authoritarianism. Traits that predispose people towards hostile attitudes towards different groups, like prejudice, but also conspiracy theory. So, authoritarianism is a personality trait that is related to conspiracy thinking. There are some personality traits that make people more susceptible to conspiracy beliefs. Another one that's not really a personality trait, I would say, but it is an individual difference variable, is collective narcissism. That's also a really good predictor.
Tell me about that a bit more.
Yeah, so that's the belief that your own a group or your own nation is superior to others and therefore should be entitled to special rights. So, you're British, you can identify with Britain in various ways. There's the healthy and the less healthy way. The healthy way would be to say, I'm proud of being British and I support the British soccer team. There's nothing wrong with that. But the collective narcissist way of saying it is saying, Britain is superior to all other countries and therefore, should have special rights. And that's, if you think British people are superior, then you also apparently are believing other people who are not British are inferior. And
Yeah, and we know where that led in the 1930s in Germany, for instance. Yeah, it can get very, very harmful very quickly.
That was, I think, a key example of collective narcissism and the harms it can do. And also, in those times, there were a lot of conspiracy theories, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, like the belief that there was a Jewish conspiracy for world domination, that capitalism and communism that Hitler believed they were both conspiracies for world domination. The belief that Jewish people were the cause of the German defeat in the First World War. There were a lot of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories associated with it, I think.
Yeah. Is there any correlation between age and belief in conspiracy theories?
Yes, there's been a recent meta-analysis looking into that. It found that conspiracy beliefs are a little bit more common among younger people, but the
Ah,
size of the relationship is extremely small. It's an extremely small effect size. So I think my interpretation of it is yes, if you look at thousands and thousands of people, you find a very slight, small trend, but by and large, it's not a particularly strong predictor age. So you can also easily find it among people who are older.
are people who believe in conspiracy theories less intelligent?
Oh, that's a good question. So there are some indications that they score lower on analytic thinking tests. So that doesn't necessarily mean a lack of intelligence, but that means they're more likely to rely on their intuition instead of on their analytic reasoning capacities. We
Yeah.
also find a link with education. So people, if people are a bit higher educated, then they become a little less likely to believe conspiracy theories. Although that link is also pretty weak, I must say. So you also have a lot of higher educated people who believe conspiracy theories.
Are people who believe in conspiracy theories mentally ill?
Oh, no, that's a good question. You know, certain types of pathologies can make it more likely that people believe conspiracy theories. Think of depression, think of schizotypy, schizophrenia, that make it more likely to believe conspiracy theories. But we also should be careful not to pathologize conspiracy theories because there's also these beliefs are some of them can be pretty widespread. And what we also really know is you don't need a pathology in order to believe in conspiracy theories. There's plenty of conspiracy theories who are doing really just fine in their lives, have, normal jobs, a normal family life. Pathologies can make people more susceptible, but you don't need a pathology to believe in conspiracy theories. It's not necessarily something pathological, no.
Brilliant. Does believing in a conspiracy theory make someone more likely to believe in another one? Does it sort of link on from there?
Yes, that was one of the first insights in when we started studying conspiracy theories. This was one of the first theoretical insights that we had to build on, actually. So the best predictor of believing one conspiracy theory is believe in a different conspiracy theory. And I think that makes sense when people accept one conspiracy theory as true, that to some extent also accepts the worldview that things are happening behind the scenes that the public isn't supposed to know about, and that isn't, all to be trusted. So it reinforces a worldview that opens the door or lowers the threshold towards other conspiracy theories. If people believe one conspiracy theories, that does predict an increased likelihood of also believing in another one.
Yes, okay. And if you are someone who maybe through the circumstances that you're in, life circumstances or personality characteristics, that you are susceptible to that, does it have any consequences in someone's life? Does it have any harmful consequences? Or is it just generally okay for people to go on believing these conspiracy ideas?
Yeah, we have some data showing that actually it can have harmful social consequences to people. So what we found during the corona pandemic was what we did a study among thousands of Dutch people, and we asked for their belief in conspiracy theories. And then 8 months later, we revisited these same participants again, and we found that the more strongly people believe conspiracy theories, the more likely they were to also indicate they had lost friends, had lost social contacts.
Okay.
During the pandemic. And that's also something we see also in other domains. Think of during the vaccination, there were people who didn't want to get vaccinated. And we also find that among that. So people who didn't want to get vaccinated, there was a social cost to that. These people were more likely to have lost friends over that. So that's, I think, a social cost of believing conspiracy theories. People actually don't like conspiracy theorists so much. They're, don't want to really hang around.
Unless they all believe the same thing, yeah, it becomes a
If they believe
point
the same
of
thing, then there's no problem. But
yeah. So that sounds sad, isn't it? And it can be that people listening know somebody a friend who is a conspiracy theorist in a certain sector, and maybe they avoid that conversation to not get into it. But What would you say was the most constructive way to talk to someone who does believe in
Yeah.
what you believe is a harmful conspiracy theory, such as anti-vaccination?
Right. Yeah, that's an important question, I think. Because let me get one thing straight. On the one hand, I do get it, why people reject conspiracy theories. On the other hand, I also think it shouldn't be the case, because that way you're only pushing a person further in their echo chambers. They will look for people who actually do listen to them. And I think there's a lot of people who also approached me during the pandemic with this serious issue, like relationships that you don't want to break off that easily. Let's think of really incidents like my son won't talk to me anymore. These kind of, or I'm headed towards divorce because my partner is believing in all these conspiracy theories. I think the best way, if you're in a situation like that, to cope with this is to try and maintain the respect. So try to not treat that person as if they're stupid or mentally ill or need therapy or whatever. No, treat them with respect. Respectfully disagree. You can disagree with that person, but always treat them as a mature adult, and always try to take that person seriously and respect that that person has a different view on things, and also ask that person to respect your different view on things. Keep in mind that if a person feels heard by you and feels respected by you and feels comfortable with you, you're actually in a way better position to ultimately eventually change that person's mind.
One of the things I always mention to people is there's often a communication clash. And conspiracy theories are emotional, as you mentioned earlier. People are very attached to it and they feel this. And so if someone's presenting rational argument against something and then somebody else is being emotional, you've got a rational argument against an emotional argument. And I think that can clash sometimes, that it doesn't work. And the people presenting the logical, what they feel is logical, rational argument, cannot understand why they're not being understood. And yet the other person is emotional, and without going into the neurochemical side of it, it's a very different part of the brain of which is in control of that sort of thing. So I think understanding again that who you're talking to might not be the logical, rational being that you are currently being, and therefore you might have this clash.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely possible. At the same time, I think with this argument, it is important to keep in mind that that doesn't mean that giving rational arguments don't work. They can work. Debunking conspiracy theories can work if it is done well. There was a very interesting study that was published a year ago in Science, looking at the role. And here we have we talked about the more harmful sides of AI, but here we saw actually a study with pretty beneficial effects of AI. So this study actually showed that if conspiracy theorists start asking AI about their opinion about their conspiracy theories, and then AI debunks these more irrational conspiracy theories, that actually was a pretty powerful mechanism in changing people's belief. It led to a reduction of about 20% in belief in conspiracy theories that also lasted 2 months later. And I think that's an important finding, because it suggests that even when conspiracy theories are driven by negative emotions, it doesn't mean conspiracy theorists are necessarily immune to reason.
Yes, that's interesting. It does remind me of the Cambridge University launched the online game that promoted itself as a vaccine against disinformation, I think they promoted it as, and it's still online. What do you think of that?
It's great, I think. Yeah, I know. I know the people behind that. It's Sander van der Linden from Cambridge University is heavily promoting that. Yeah, I think there's not one way to tackle this issue, but I think it's an important contribution, because this is a technique that trains people to become resilient towards misinformation and conspiracy theories before encountering them. So it makes people more skilled at recognizing these falsehoods and increases their critical thinking towards it.
Yeah, and if listeners want to go to that, it's online now. It's getbadnews.com, getbadnews.com, and I'll put it in the show notes as well. With that, though, I mean, you said it very well there, that it helps people train themselves to identify misinformation and be able to sort of sort through the facts from fiction. But is that type of intervention really effective for people who believe in conspiracy theories? I guess I can't see people who are thoroughly into conspiracy theories going to getbadnews.com to give that a go. It's more likely going to be people who don't believe that sort of thing anyway.
Yeah, but yeah, okay, yes, I think that's true. But please keep in mind that if people are really entrenched in a conspiracy theories, if they're really strong believers, they are also really difficult to change. But keep in mind, there's also a very big silent majority who, may not believe conspiracy theories so strongly, but could be persuaded by them, and they could also be open to non-conspiratorial narratives. There are just a lot of citizens out there who doubt what's true. What can I believe and what should I not believe? And I think among these people, and that's, I think, a pretty big group, a tool like this can have a big influence. So, yeah, I think you're right. You can't necessarily, you won't reach everyone with this tool. You also are unlikely to change everyone with this tool. But yeah, the glass is half full versus half empty. Yeah? Also, keep in mind the ones that you do reach and the effect that you can have on them.
So that's been incredibly interesting. Now, we've only been able to cover the basics of understanding conspiracy theories and their believers here. If you do want to dive into the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories more, the second edition of Jan-Willem's book, The Psychology of Conspiracy Theories, is released in December by Routledge. And I'd say that it's essential reading for navigating our very confusing modern world and the people who inhabit it. Professor, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me at your show. Yeah.